What does Resident Evil 4 on the Zeebo, Call of Duty on the N-Gage, and Halo Combat Evolved on the Macintosh computer have in common? Well, they're games that released on some weird and unusual platforms. But that's not a bad thing necessarily. And today we're looking at everything, including these games and a lot of other really weird ones. Let's go ahead and get started. Ready, set, go. For example, something that still seems crazy today is kind of how mobile games and the mobile landscape have changed. It's actually kind of wild. I gotta say, Fortnite did do something kind of neat when Fortnite was also available on mobile devices. Now, it might seem more standard nowadays that like crossplay between consoles and mobile phones is more common than at least it used to be, but like Fortnite letting you party up with your friends who are on Xbox while you're just playing on an iPhone was completely wild. I don't know, mobile gaming in general has always been really interesting with how quickly and rapidly that landscape has changed to where you can pretty much play a lot of full-fledged gaming experiences, but on your phone instead of like needing a console or a computer. And a lot of the time it's like the same exact game, even if it has like slightly lower quality. Roblox surprisingly was another innovator when it came to that. I mean, say what you will about Roblox, but them dropping a Android version of the game all the way back in 2012 to let you play all the same games but on Android is really impressive. The fact that someone who's like playing Roblox can play on their phone and then like pick right up where they were with like the same friends or whatever on your computer or on your Xbox. That's really impressive. And then more recently, there were games that were kind of built for mobile phones first, but then also had PC and console releases after. Like Genshin Impact is a great example. I mean, it launched on mobile and PC and PS4, and then later it came to Xbox and PS5. But just the fact in general that like this game probably makes most of its money off of mobile players, that's pretty cool. I mean, gacha games are just like a crazy thing in themselves, but there's now a lot of them that are on mobile, but also on PC. Zenless Zone Zero, Hentai Star Rail. I don't know if it's just me getting old or maybe it is something really impressive, but nonetheless, I just find it stupidly impressive when we're seeing like gaming experiences where you can play on mobile and then pick it up on like a console. I don't know. It's just something that I never really thought would be so commonplace as it's starting to become nowadays. Now, the next game I want to talk about is technically the sponsor for this video, but it definitely falls in line with what we've been talking about. So you'll be proud of us for cleverly worming this together, and we get to pay some bills at the same time. Lucky that Once Human is free to play. Once Human just dropped on mobile, and it's been a blast to explore. You can kind of imagine your favorite open world experiences like Genshin Impact, but with a twist. It's a gritty, post-apocalyptic vibe with creepy monsters that look like they stepped right out of an SCP file, and there's like this non-stop survival action element to the game. And yeah, it's completely free to play, and not only do they not do the whole we'll charge you later type thing, there's no pay to win in the game here at all. Everything's cosmetic, and you actually have to grind and play the game to get stronger, which is something that we really expect. What's cool is that it's cross-platform, so if you've been grinding this game on PC, you can seamlessly jump into mobile without losing progress, or if you're starting fresh, the mobile launch comes with over 1,000 premium awards to get you geared up fast, which basically lets you skip that early grind and get straight into the fun stuff. There's PvE, PvP, vehicles, weird superpowers called deviations. Like, why not? It's chaotic in the best way, especially if you got a squad. So if this sounds like your thing, you can hit the link in the description to get started and claim all those free rewards before they're gone and give Once Human a shot. Okay, let's talk about some other games. Now, I know we just did a whole section on like mobile games that were surprising, but of course, Minecraft was kind of an innovator in that front also. The fact that Pocket Edition came out when it did and you could play Minecraft on the go was a really big deal. Now, originally, Minecraft Pocket Edition was just a port of Minecraft available on iOS and Android and Windows phones or whatever, and that was cool. In itself, you could play with your other friends on iOS, Android, and Windows phones. But the big deal was when they updated Minecraft to the Bedrock Edition, which essentially made Minecraft on mobile the same compatible Minecraft experience with the other platforms that were available out there. This meant crossplay. This meant continuing your progress across the board. But this would kind of lead the way for there to not necessarily need to be a bunch of different versions of Minecraft. Back when Minecraft first was making its way into consoles, there was the Xbox 360 version of Minecraft, the PS3 version of Minecraft. They had different box arts. And then the Wii U version of Minecraft. There was also a 3DS version of Minecraft, which, what an experience that was. But no, Minecraft now could be played on all like the modern platforms and like play together with anyone on any platform. I think that was really cool. But if single player Minecraft experiences on retro game consoles was more your thing, all 0 of you watching this video, I do want to acknowledge the existence of homebrew gaming because there are some really interesting things things that exist on consoles that probably shouldn't exist, but they do anyways. Like Classic Cube, which essentially is like a Minecraft demake or whatever. It was intended to be a Minecraft-like experience, but optimized in a way where it could run on substantially lower end hardware. And it's like open source, and like the community's been working on this for a long time. And there are so many different versions of this game. It is incredible the platforms that have been able to get a version of this running. There's an OG Xbox version, a Nintendo Wii version that apparently runs pretty well. It also could run on like low-end computers, even really old retro computers. But the ones I've been most interested in the fact that there's like a Minecraft experience actually running in a way that can be played on actual hardware is the Dreamcast version. Remember the Sega Dreamcast? No one does. And it's just so interesting that if you are a Sega Dreamcast owner, you could essentially play a version of Minecraft called Classic Cube, but then take it a step further, and this version of the game, as it continues to be built and optimized for other platforms, also has a playable version for the PlayStation 1 and a playable version for the Sega Saturn. Now, I couldn't actually find footage of anyone playing it on the Sega Saturn, so instead I tasked Luke with the quest of figuring out how to get it working and to experience it, and this was what he experienced.
I couldn't get it to work. I tried multiple emulators, and if in the future our YouTube channel gets hacked again, it's probably because I downloaded a virus on accident with all these emulators I tried.
You know, Call of Duty obviously was a really big deal when it released. It was changing the game out there, and depending on what console you had, you could experience Call of Duty in different ways. You know, Call of Duty 1, 2, and 3 were released all over the place. But Activision realized that when it came to Call of Duty, they really needed to just start prioritizing quality experiences. And when Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare released, it released on Windows for PC players, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360. That was it, mostly. A year later, it did release on Mac OS, and there was the whole like Wii Reflex version 2 years later. But when the next Call of Duty game would come, Call of Duty 5, later renamed Call of Duty World at War, I guess Activision had like a divine thought. Hey, what if we put this on the PlayStation 2 also? But Activision, Call of Duty has like a new engine. It could never work well on the PlayStation 2 now that we have this cool new technology. Activision had the response to that. Let's grab our Studio Rebellion. They did Delta Force Black Hawk Down. Use that engine, make a World War II game. Doesn't matter how, doesn't matter what it's like, just call it the same game. We'll get some voice actors from the main game to record lines. Don't worry about the story. No one cares about the story. And thus, Call of Duty World at War Final Fronts, which is a long name, but actually compared to modern Call of Duty names, isn't that long. This Call of Duty game was neat. It had no multiplayer, no zombies, just 13 missions of back-to-back PlayStation 2 World War II action, and it got a great old 4.5 out of 10. Check out this artificial intelligence that it had. I don't know. Halo Combat Evolved originally was supposed to release on the Mac. It was announced at Macworld 1999, and it was going to be like a Mac game. But then a bunch of deals were made, and all of a sudden, Halo CE was launching on a brand new console known as the Xbox in 2001. But that didn't mean Halo would completely stay off of computers forever. Eventually, Halo would be released on PC as Microsoft greenlit a port of the game that was developed by Gearbox. They took the original Bungie Halo and made it for the PC. And in some ways, it was actually really cool. Like the online connectivity and stuff was ahead of its time. But what about the Macintosh players out there? Nobody remembers that this exists, but Halo Combat Evolved did see a release on Mac at the end of 2003. Now, this was mostly the same as the PC version of the game, but it did release about 3 or 4 months after the PC port released, and it had like its own dedicated development studio that worked on handling porting the game from the PC to the Mac. So it was like a port of a port. It's getting wild. Okay, I mean, besides the fact the box art was kind of different slightly, look at these labels. Let's be real, Halo on the Mac, there's no way that this is a functioning good version of the game. Wait, this game supports 1920 by 1080 resolution natively without having to install any programs? That's actually better than the PC version. A while back, our boy General Kid did a video where he looked at the Mac version of Halo Combat Evolved, and that in itself was pretty interesting. He found that the enter key just straight up doesn't work. You have to click all the menus with the mouse. But hey, that's a difference between the versions, right? It seems like most of the visual issues and other types of little technical glitches that were commonplace in the PC version of Halo Combat Evolved also carried over to the Mac version, so that's not really too surprising. I mean, these bugs probably were, I guess, somewhat difficult to fix because a lot of them still continued to exist all the way up until the launch of Master Chief Collection. Those bugs were still there. Combat Evolved Anniversary, they were there. Combat Evolved in MCC, they were there. Eventually, I think some of them got fixed, but but yeah, these little things were definitely in the Mac version too. You're not missing out on that. Okay, but other exclusive things to the Mac version that aren't in any other version of Halo, there was a benchmarking mode where you could like test it out on your computer to see how your computer handles it. That surprisingly wasn't in the PC version of the game. It's a Mac exclusive feature, I guess. Okay, there are some other like interesting things as far as like how this game would exist on Mac computers like after its release, because Apple eventually like ended OpenGL and some sort of other rendering stuff that Macs were known for that I guess Halo Combat Evolved took advantage of. So if you tried to like figure out a way to run the game using Apple's like built-in legacy modes or whatever, like doing the little workarounds to get old software to work, the game like visually just falls apart, which is kind of interesting. It really is just a specimen of a game. I don't know what this is anymore. I don't know how many people actually played Halo for Mac outside of maybe if your school had Mac computers and someone like passed around a flash drive or something with it on there and then you could play like the demo version of the game with the boys. Maybe then. But outside of that, there's maybe like a couple hundred people. I mean, I'm sure the game sold thousands of copies, but you get what I mean. This is probably the most obscure version of Halo Combat Evolved, and I think it's interesting that it did see a release on Mac computers back in the day. Okay, we've talked about the Zeebo before on this channel, so we won't spend too much time, but this was a gaming console released in 2009, specifically to Brazilian markets. I think some of them also might have reached like Mexico and whatnot, but this thing was the They even had bigger plans of trying to launch it in China and Russia. Those didn't end up happening. This was a budget console, and a lot of the games that did make their way onto the console were actually like mobile phone ports. But that brings up a couple of really interesting games, like Resident Evil 4 for the Zeebo. I mean, look at this. This is an insane experience in itself. Why are the zombies blue? I don't know, but you're on the Zeebo. We can complain all day about Call of Duty requiring like 150 gigabytes on your hard drive if you want to be a COD player in 2025, but Resident Evil 4 for the Zeebo, 7 megabytes. That's it. I don't know much about how games work, but I assume these 7 megabytes are just rubbing together as fast as possible to make this experience that you're looking at on your screen, and I think that that's pretty cool.
In 2003, the Nokia N-Gage released, and this was supposed to be a hybrid device that aimed to merge a handheld gaming console with a cell phone, MP3 player, and I guess a PDA. This was priced at like $300, which is equivalent to like $530 today, I would say roughly. And this was Nokia's attempt to enter the handheld gaming market to dethrone Nintendo, I guess. This device that looked like a taco was supposed to bring AAA gaming on the go. It had features like Bluetooth multiplayer, internet connectivity, and a library of 50 titles, including a bunch of ports. And all of these ports were really weird, so let's go through them real quick. The original Tomb Raider came out for this device, which originally was released on PlayStation and PC in 96, and this had simplified controls but also a new shadow racing time trial mode. Then there was a port of Crash Nitro Kart, which was a scaled down 3D version with gameplay that was similar to the already existing GBA version with just a little bit better graphics. Also, the original Tony Hawk Pro Skater came out on the N-Gage with its own port, which, you know, it's not the worst looking thing ever. It probably works better than some of the other games on this list. Like, for example, the port of Call of Duty 1 was very simplified and very crappy. Like we talked about it in a video like a couple months ago, and I remember this was not a good game to play. Like the control scheme for first-person shooter on the N-Gage was just abysmal. Just with the buttons of the N-Gage, most of these games just felt clunky to play. Another port that was massively hindered by the controls of the N-Gage was Red Faction as well. Ubisoft had a lot of faith in the N-Gage, and they surely didn't want to miss out if this was the next big thing, because they made several games, not just ports, but full exclusives for the N-Gage. Firstly, they would port Splinter Cell Chaos Theory and Rayman 3 for the N-Gage, but then they would also make a Splinter Cell game that was exclusive to the N-Gage called Splinter Cell Team Stealth Action. They did not stop there, because they also made Pathway to Glory, which was made by the trial studio Ubisoft Red Links, which was a tactical turn-based game and exclusive to the N-Gage, which even got a sequel called Pathway to Glory Ikusa Islands, which also was exclusive to the N-Gage. And And both of these games even featured a multiplayer mode that you can play over Bluetooth or I guess the internet, because you're on the N-Gage, and the N-Gage is where hardcore gaming happens. Also, weirdly enough, they would get Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Jungle Storm ported for the N-Gage, which was an expansion pack for the original Ghost Recon. Like, they wouldn't port the original Ghost Recon game, they would just port the expansion pack. Which, if I remember correctly, the Jungle Storm expansion pack was already containing content from a older expansion pack called Island Thunder, so this was some like very recycled content. But other big publishers like EA also put a bunch of games on there. Like, there was multiple FIFA games like FIFA 04 and FIFA 05, also multiple titles from the X-Men Legends and Spider-Man 2, who were also published by Activision, were ported for the N-Gage. Also, Sega would port one Sonic game to the N-Gage, which would be called Sonic N, and there was a port of Sonic Advance for the Game Boy Advance, which I guess that one made a little more sense because it was a Game Boy Advance game they were porting, so at least they knew it could work on a handheld. And while I could go on with more and more games, like the Elder Scrolls game that exclusively came out on the N-Gage called Shadowkey, I'm just gonna say this: all of these games sucked, and the N-Gage was a massive failure and got discontinued just 3 years after its release.
Okay, it's that time of the video where we got to talk about China, specifically Nintendo and China. Now, back in the day, there was this weird thing that happened in China where they decided to impose pretty much a near total ban on gaming consoles because they were concerned about gaming addiction amongst youth. This was in the year 2000, like right at the big turning point of the gaming industry becoming massive. Essentially, when this bill got passed in 2000, there was just a ton of sanctions added in to the entire gaming industry within China. There was a lot of new content regulations on like the operations of internet cafes and arcades, but there was also a pretty massive ban on the import and sale of consoles and arcade machines. But here's the little catch here. This ban wasn't completely like universal. There were workarounds, there were loopholes, and obviously massive gaming companies would want to try to work on figuring out those loopholes. Back in 2000, there was 1.2 billion people living in China alone. 1.2 billion people who all could potentially be gamers. Surprisingly, Sony actually tried to take on China to get the PlayStation 2 to sell there. It was a little hard. Bootlegging became really popular for gamers in China because they couldn't get an official PlayStation 2, and Sony had to keep pushing back the PlayStation 2 release in China. It was a lot of bureaucracy in trying to figure out how to get the PlayStation 2 to release. A lot of the time, like, they would talk about how it was a computer entertainment system and like not even really mention the whole gaming side of things. Anything that they wanted to do, they had to get approval by the Chinese government. But then on top of getting the PlayStation 2 to release in China, there was also like games as an issue. The Chinese government had to actually manually approve every single game release and review every single game. So in total, there were 10 games released in China. Sony, being a Japanese company on the outside, not having like direct connections to the Chinese government, maybe played a factor in this, but it didn't take long for Sony just to cut their losses and give up on China. But Nintendo, on the other hand, they were like, there's a billion plus people that could be Nintendo gamers. How do we get our system in China? Well, they didn't want to run into the same issues that PlayStation had, so they decided, let's get a guy on the inside. And by guy, I mean a company called IQ Ltd. They were a video game manufacturing company, and Nintendo would have a pretty close relationship with IQ during the course of China's overarching video game ban, which finally was mostly lifted in 2015. And that's why we get to see some interesting game consoles like the IQ Player. Yeah. It was essentially a video game home console for Chinese gamers out there that specifically could play Nintendo 64 games. So the IQ Player, which was referred to as the Shenyoji, which translates to God Gaming Machine. But why was this okay and like the PlayStation 2 wasn't okay? Well, look here. Technically, the ban was on gaming consoles. And if you look at this thing, this is just a controller. This is a plug and play machine. No console necessary. It's all in the controller. So there's like a workaround. Instead of a game cartridge, it was a memory card that had the games in it. And they were just like Nintendo 64 games with Chinese localizations. And I mean, it was interesting. But by far to me, the most interesting one is a little game called Dongwu Senlin. You see, Animal Forest, Dobutsu no Mori, is is Animal Crossing, but it originally released in Japan on the Nintendo 64. Then they would do a localized version of the game for the West, and that would release on the GameCube, and then Japan would get an upgraded version for the GameCube over there, and then Japan would also get an even cooler, like super upgraded version called Animal Crossing E+, that only they got. But Dongwu Senlin is a little bit more interesting because this is the original Nintendo 64 version of the game all the way back that only came out in Japan, never came to the West, localized for Chinese audiences. And there's a couple of like small changes, some decorations are different, but essentially a completely exclusive version of the game only available over there. And it released in 2006, which, mind you, if you're an Animal Crossing fan like I am, that's already well into the second generation of Animal Crossing. Like Animal Crossing Wild World for the DS was already out for about a year by the time the first generation game came to China. So I just think that that's crazy. There was a lot of other Nintendo 64 games that released on the iQ player, and by a lot I mean like 14 games. But hey, it was something and it was pretty obscure. This partnership with iQ and Nintendo would continue for years with a iQ Game Boy Advance. There was a couple of games released for that. There was a bunch of canceled games too. The iQ DS released, and that had 7 games. I don't know, this one's a little weird to me because like it seemed like they kept trying to make this thing work and it never really got more than just a handful of games. Maybe that was intentional. There was an iQ 3DS XL that had 2 main games, and then there was like 14 other types of games that were released in different regions that I guess could also be used on the iQ player. I guess it makes sense because still these games were available in Hong Kong and Taiwan, you know, back before those countries were slowly being absorbed back into China. Nonetheless, this started a whole nother arc with Nintendo because once they wrapped things up with iQ, they decided, hey, let's still do something with our games. And another pretty massive company was thinking, hey, let's do something with some games in China, specifically Nvidia. Okay, so Nvidia Shield is an interesting thing. This was a line of products that can play games. You can like plug it in, you know. This was after the big China ban, so it can look more like a console. It's okay. But since Nvidia Shield already had the infrastructure and already kind of had like a player base there, Nintendo actually took their games to Nvidia and were like, hey, let's do something in China together. So weirdly enough, because you never see Nintendo games release on platforms that aren't Nintendo, usually, it is very interesting to see a home console in China playing new Super Mario Bros. Wii, Punch-Out!, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Super Mario Galaxy, and Donkey Kong Country Returns on a non-Nintendo system. I just think that's pretty cool. Apparently Mario Kart was also planned, the Wii version of Mario Kart, but that ended up getting canceled. Now mind you, this console carrying Nintendo games started all the way in 2017 and ran through 2019, which is quite a while later from when these games originally released on the Wii and GameCube. But hey, it was something. Also, it's worth noting that the music in one of the trailers for the Nvidia Nintendo crossover is insanely something else.
你可以重拾童年的游戏快感，用 1080p 超逼真画质体验精选游戏，尽情畅玩。New 超级马里奥兄弟 Wii。塞尔达传说：皇冠公主，机拳热斗，更多游戏即将登陆，重新发现游戏的魅力，尽在 NVIDIA Shield。
When the first BioShock game came out in 2007, mobile gaming was in its infancy. The first iPhone had just launched months earlier in June of 2007, and with specs like a 412 MHz processor and 128 megabytes of RAM, it wasn't like a gaming machine. Especially playing a AAA game like BioShock at the time was unthinkable. iPads didn't even exist, they didn't come out until 2010. So when in 2014, 7 years after its original release date, BioShock came out on iOS, it was kind of a weird port. Now this game was ported by 2K China, who had already experience porting some other games that 2K made like XCOM or NBA 2K13 to iOS and Android. So I guess they were the perfect studio to do this. And I remember at the time seeing this and being like, oh, this is kind of cool. They're putting some more AAA games on iPhones now, so you know, maybe a new audience will be able to experience it. But the port was a pretty massive downgrade. And the virtual joystick and the buttons also kind of stuff didn't really work. It led to a clunky combat experience and aiming was really hard. Even nowadays, I'm not a big fan of the touchscreen controls for phone games. Like I played PUBG Mobile in the past and I'm kind of struggling with like aiming and walking and all that stuff. It just kind of feels off when it's not a controller or a mouse and keyboard, when it's just a touchscreen. It's kind of weird. This port was also limited to certain iPhones or Apple devices that had the A6 and A7 chips, meaning it was available on like the 5S and the iPad Air, which excluded people that had a little bit of an older iPhone. But even then, graphically and performance-wise, this game suffered massively. The textures were low resolution, there was barely any shadows, a lot of detail was missing, the whole atmosphere of Rapture was significantly changed. Just look at this side by side. I don't know, it looks worse and it looks like a weird game. They also took out jumping for some reason, like you couldn't jump at all, which they had to alter some things like the tutorial and stuff. And I don't know, I feel like taking jumping out of a game makes it a very different experience. Lots of reviewers at the time just criticized that the whole flow of combat when you're like in a big fight, like with the Big Daddy, for example, was very much different and wasn't as smooth because of the way healing and aiming and all that stuff would not work at the same time. Also, BioShock in the App Store was only available for roughly a year, being delisted in 2015 after a new iOS update broke the game and made it not compatible, which is made worse by the fact that people actually paid $15 for this and within a year they weren't able to play it anymore. Also, this is a little side fact, but in 2010 there was also a port called BioShock 3D that released in India, I believe, and this wasn't even for like the smartphone type phones like the iPhone. This was for like the old Verizon kind of phones. Also, people only had access to the first 4 levels, which was also pretty weird, but you know, this is just a little side thing that also existed. Nowadays, you can find a lot of RTS games on a console, but up until the late 2000s or early 2010s, this was a rarity. And one of these rarities was Starcraft 64 for the N64, as the name might give away. A mouse and keyboard RTS crammed on the N64 controller? On paper, this shouldn't have worked. Yet, against all odds, this is a highly rated and critically acclaimed port of the original Starcraft game from 1989. Even the developer Mass Media Games said on their own website that this was a nearly absurd undertaking. Yet, the cartridges sold out in a matter of weeks. But somehow, they figured out a good way to convert this computer RTS onto a console. Starcraft 64 released in 2000, and the N64 version was bundled with the base game and the DLC Brood War, which also included an exclusive mission called Resurrection 4 that you would unlock after completing all campaigns and finding all the cheat codes. Because of the N64 controller, they had to completely overhaul the controls. Players would navigate menus with the joystick, and commands like building or researching were mapped to buttons. For example, pressing a button auto-selected the nearest worker or structure, which kind of streamlined the whole gameplay loop. With an RTS already being such a rare thing for a console at the time, what was even more rare for an RTS game at the time was split-screen multiplayer, which Starcraft 64 supported locally. Now, while this was a good port and a fun game to play, there was some compromises and technical limitations they had to work around, obviously, because it was the N64. And there was also some stuff like they had to censor some words like which they had to replace with poop, and some words like bastard remained. You know, the game is kind of gritty and has a grittier language. And I guess the removal of some words or the censorship of some words was because of Nintendo, because the ESRB rated the game the same rating. Both StarCraft 64 and the original version were rated T14. Now, when it came to the technical limitations, cinematics were replaced with slideshows, and unit sprites were also simplified. And the later you got into the game with bigger battles, the more your frame rate suffered. And also all the voice acting was removed and replaced with text. Plus, you needed the N64 expansion pack to play the Brood War missions, because I guess those were the newer DLC, so maybe it was more graphically intense and you were only able to play it with the expansion pack, which, if you remember, was the thing that expanded your hardware capabilities on the N64. You just kind of pop it into the console and it gives you more RAM, or I don't know what it actually did. Now, critics would obviously mention this in their reviews, all these things like the performance issues, etc, etc, but this game had a lot of fans and kind of became a cult classic, and obviously it's worse than the PC version, but a lot of fans thought it was good for what it was. Blizzard themselves, though, did not think the same way. Especially co-founder Mike Mohane criticized the port for clearly being a port, something that felt like kind of ruined the game and made it a worse version of the original StarCraft. He also went on to say it wasn't designed for that interface. From that point on, we're not just going to put out ports to consoles anymore. If we're going to do a console version, we're going to make sure that we think the game's suited for consoles. And after this, Blizzard Blizzard decided that they would do no more ports unless the game is specifically tailored and suited for console experience and developed with a console experience in mind. That's probably why we never saw StarCraft 2 come out on the Xbox 360 or PS3, because I guess this kind of left a sour taste in their mouth. Though by that time there was also other RTS doing a good job, like Halo Wars, which came out in 2009, 1 year before StarCraft 2. So I think they could have done StarCraft 2 successfully on console as well, but that's besides the point. Nonetheless, StarCraft 64 is just a weird thing to exist and a weird experiment that Blizzard did during the N64 era that is often forgotten nowadays. Also, the cartridges are super expensive, so if you want to add this to your collection, you're gonna pay for just a cartridge above $100.
Now, the next one is a little bit of an interesting topic, and I wanted to specifically ask Luke about his recollection of things, because I know for a fact, let's just test this. Luke.
Yeah. Me? Sorry. I respect you.
I was like waiting for you to respond.
Sorry.
Luke.
Yes?
Were you a Minecraft kid when you were a kid?
Definitely.
Like the Creeper t-shirt and everything? Creeper hoodie?
Oh. No. Not like that. I just played it. I just played it.
Okay. Now, I remember back in the day, Minecraft was pretty basic, pretty straightforward. There wasn't like a whole lot going on story-wise.
There's story?
I said there wasn't a lot going on story-wise.
Okay, dude. I'm just like, where's this heading, dude?
I mean, there was like a credits that had like a story, right? There was like at least like 3 game theory videos on it. But when they created Minecraft story mode, everything changed. So Minecraft story mode was an interesting experience. It was a Minecraft themed story game, but it was like a Telltale The Walking Dead type game, except in a Minecraft world. A weird concept, but I think it was popular enough. Now, this released on pretty much every major platform at the time. We had it on the Xbox 360, the Xbox One, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4. It was even on the Wii U. You guys see that? But here's the thing. They released it in a lot of other places too, because then they were like, we're not done. We're putting it on iOS and Android, which, okay, to be fair, I mean, a little ahead of its time because this game came out in 2015. So like doing the multi-platform thing had already started to be done. Like Telltale had done it with The Walking Dead already, so not a huge shock. Also, there was a PC version and a Mac version. I skipped over that. But then they were like getting a little creative with it. They did an Apple TV version. They even did a Fire OS version. Do you remember those like Amazon Fire tablets that always ran really poorly but were really cheap?
Yeah. Also, does that mean you could get it on the Fire Stick?
It was on Apple TV, so I don't see why not. The biggest one that was kind of a shocker, that the game's first season was being released on Netflix in 2018.
On Netflix?
Yeah. So the game straight up was on Netflix, which kind of marked a really interesting time because Netflix randomly decided to try to make the foray into like gaming, and it all started here, I think, with Minecraft story mode. They were like, this is our in to that industry, and they jumped on it. The Netflix version is no longer available. It existed, and it's gone now. So rest in peace, Minecraft story mode on Netflix. I am curious on how that played. I should look it up. I just can only imagine, like, whenever I try to navigate my television OS, it's the laggiest thing anyways. I can't imagine that the Netflix version was that much better. But then again, Bandersnatch wasn't that bad, which was like a whole choose your own adventure Black Mirror special that came out. And that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I guess that must have had similar gameplay, right, to the Minecraft story mode, I assume, yeah.
Yes, so when you're just choosing this or that.
Yeah. I mean, people used to do it back in the day with the annotations on the YouTube videos, you remember? When it would like lead you to different unlisted videos. Like, I mean, it's the same concept.
That was a wild time. Do you remember how like awful annotations were?
Yeah, I remember like opening a video and the whole screen was just like
a tutorial video, and it was just like a million different things.
But definitely a weird thing to release a game on Netflix. I guess there's more games now, right?
Netflix never stopped with it. They release games kind of regularly. There's a Rainbow Six Siege like exclusive game on Netflix. I don't know if you even knew about that.
Yeah, it was like the chibi one, right? I think we talked about it in a video before.
But what I don't understand is this is not quite the same thing as the Minecraft thing. It's on only the App Store, like the Apple App Store and Google Play on mobile, and you don't use the Netflix app. Just if you want to play it, you log into your Netflix account.
Oh, like a subscription?
I think so. I think Crunchyroll does the same thing, actually, with some of their exclusive games. It's like, you can download these games if you have a subscription, but it's not the same as what they originally did with the Minecraft story mode.
I guess it's just desperate to offer more perks to keep the subscriber numbers up.
I guess so. But at the same time, remember they announced that they were like putting together the dream team of like a AAA developer studio, and they got like Joseph Staten, who's like known for Halo and Destiny.
And then they closed it.
They closed it. It's a tragic. So who knows what's going on at Netflix? Netflix like was really cool for a very little while, and then it just hasn't been that cool for a long time.
Right. They've been losing subscribers for the last 2-3 years, I think.
But I heard also, though, when they did the whole thing where you can't share accounts anymore, they made a ton of money. Like, all the people upset about it didn't actually move the needle.
I mean, that's fair. And they might make some money. But I mean, I think over time, with the price increases, it's just like all the streaming is kind of dying.
I mean, what is there on Netflix? There's like 1 or 2 good things a year, maybe.
Maybe, and you subscribe when it comes out.
Netflix used to be like, there was cool stuff regularly. Now it's like once in a blue moon. It's like, oh, Squid Game's out. And Squid Game's, even the new season's good. It's like, in this case, it'll be twice a year and then that's it. But you're paying monthly for it. I don't know. Do you want to talk about Xbox coming on PlayStation, or do you want me to lead it and then we just talk about it?
Xbox doing what to PlayStation?
Xbox coming on PlayStation. What do you mean?
Holy.
Yeah, like Xbox has been like.
All right. Honestly, this whole thing. Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. I just said it like crazily.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about.
There's this thing with like, I don't even know what to call it. It's like console exclusives used to be a big deal, and they used to move hardware. But nowadays, the different gaming systems are so like reinforced that like a lot of exclusives just go to other platforms to make more money. And it's not just Xbox coming to PlayStation, which we've seen like Sea of Thieves, Forza Horizon 5, right? But it's also like stuff like PlayStation titles coming to PC now. The Lego Horizon game, which is a PlayStation franchise, coming to like something like the Switch. You know what I mean? There's all these small things where the rules of an exclusive kind of get broken and they don't apply as much anymore. So it's like really a free game nowadays.
It is interesting how for a long time everything was isolated, and then slowly Xbox was like, we're gonna start putting our stuff on PC, and then they were like, you know, Cuphead might do good on the Switch, and then slowly they kind of just started creeping over, doing other stuff, doing their thing. Then, you know, Xbox was like, yeah, no one's buying an Xbox anymore, let's just make some money, throw our stuff out there. Sea of Thieves, PlayStation. Forza, that was a big one. PlayStation, Hi-Fi Rush, a lot of things just going all over the place. What's interesting is at the same time, it never quite felt like PlayStation was reciprocating that, which I mean makes sense. I mean, PlayStation gave up MLB The Show. They were like, Xbox, you guys can have this. The Switch also got it, so it wasn't really just for Xbox. Death Stranding, but that wasn't really like, that's not like Sony's game. They helped with the engine, I think, but it wasn't like a PlayStation like flagship, like a timed exclusive, I guess, which Xbox had done before. So that actually did make its way to Xbox, surprisingly. But outside of that, it's definitely a little more one-sided. So if you're an Xbox player, you definitely get the worst version of the deal.
Well, all I can think about that is because maybe it's just not worth it, because Xbox will make more money putting their stuff on PlayStation, but PlayStation putting their stuff on Xbox, they're not going to make as much profit.
Yeah, because there's like a couple thousand people on Xbox still, right?
And remember when we saw those, what was it? The Marvel Rivals?
Yeah. No, what's it, Call of Duty sales? And Marvel Rivals. Both have been posted.
Marvel Rivals microtransactions, I think, was what I'm thinking about. And it's like PlayStation players, $20 million a day, or I don't know. I'll put it on the screen, whatever.
Here are the numbers on the screen. Yeah, what we saw.
A huge amount on PlayStation, a huge amount on PC, and then Xbox, like a tiny, like $2. I mean, not really $2, but like comparatively, it was like so small. I mean, I think it's indicative of how many people are left on the Xbox. I don't think Xbox players just spend less money. I think like... there's just less.
Now, let's do a quick reality check for Xbox fans out there. And mind you, I'm one of you guys. I play on an Xbox Series X every single day, but I'm also not delusional. The Xbox brand is heading in a place where a lot of people don't want to accept. I don't know how many more consoles we're going to be getting in the future, unless crazy things happen, miracles are thrown around. I think we're in the end times, and you know what? Let's just ride it out. Just because you're on a dying platform doesn't mean you can't have fun and ride it into the sunset and then be able to be like, I was one of those last people still on the Xbox. At least that's how I'm coping with it.
Dude, I'm a little sad, dude. I feel a little bad for you.
I know. Real talk. Okay, I think the Xbox brand will stick around. Our gamer score will stick around. As far as like consoles, I mean, it's looking grim. The thing that's interesting is if you look at Xbox's state right now, it really does feel like they are in the same exact boat Sega was with the Dreamcast 20 years ago. If you guys remember, Sega used to make consoles once upon a time, but the Sega Dreamcast, which was like kind of a cool console, they had a couple of cool games on there, did not sell well at all. And Sega began the transition away from hardware manufacturing into just pure game development and publishing. And they survived as a company because of it. Not that Microsoft is like, as a whole, is like going under. It's more, is the Xbox brand staying afloat? Is it staying relevant? What are the sources of income for Xbox? But Sega pivoted really hard. But they started pivoting by putting their exclusive games on what used to be their competitors' platforms. So like Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, Nintendo swooped those up with the GameCube. And then there was a couple of other games. They threw some stuff on Xbox. They threw some stuff on PlayStation 2. And then they kind of packed it up and stopped making consoles. And I feel like we could be heading the same way. I don't have a lot of hope for the future of Xbox. Doesn't make me not an Xbox fan. It just, you know, it's going to be an interesting ride, and I'm down for it. Let's ride this thing out until they stop making consoles, because it'll be funny. Or at least that's what we got to do. That's all we can do.
Or it's like the captain going down with the Titanic.
Yeah, we just go down with the ship. And then we can say we were there.
I don't think the captain made it out.
Yeah, there's really no bright side. I think it also is interesting to talk a little bit about like the homebrew community and, you know, custom games that get released that you wouldn't expect to release. Portal 64 is probably one of the more impressive things that I've seen, created by programmer coder James Lambert, despite the fact that the IGN article refers to him as Joe Lambert for some reason. Nonetheless, he recreated Portal, but like with Nintendo 64 development assets. He created this really cool Portal demo for the Nintendo 64, and it was coming along awesomely. And then Valve shut it down.
Because they were scared of Nintendo.
Right, that's the gist of it. Valve typically is pretty chill with things that the community works on using their IPs. As long as like they're definitely not like generating a ton of money. Actually, sometimes they're okay with you generating money if like you put it on the Steam store. But Portal is a little bit weird because the Nintendo 64 is like proprietary stuff, and it could put Valve in like hot water if they didn't like take the legal action. Nonetheless, there are efforts to possibly save the project, but a lot of it was done. And the fact that Portal 64 exists and that you can play some of Portal on the Nintendo 64 is incredible to me. That is one of the coolest things. Nintendo 64 homebrew is still primitive as far as like new development being made on games to release on old Nintendo 64 hardware. We've seen a ton of games release on like the NES, the Dreamcast, like those platforms do see releases sometimes, but the Nintendo 64 not so much. And it is kind of cool to see something every once in a while pop up. And I think Portal 64 was cool because of that.
Did you also know that Valve does take down stuff? They took down a Source 2 Team Fortress thing as well.
So maybe they are the next Nintendo. Nintendo doesn't mess around with lawsuits, that's for sure. They're not a GoldenEye speedrunner. Let me do the outro.
The outro?
So what do you guys think? No?
I don't
You
know.
don't want to do the outro?
No,
Like, what do you mean?
I just wanted to scream the outro, dude.
Okay, what did you guys think of these topics? Let us know in the comments. Did we miss a game that you were like shocked showed up on a platform? I mean, there was others we could have talked about, like Nintendo Switch games that were surprising. Like the fact that Skyrim did make it to the Switch. I mean, okay.
Elder Scrolls Blades.
Elder Scrolls Blades being selected to release on the Switch was surprising too. Yeah, that's true. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Also, huge thank you to our patrons and our YouTube members. Their names are on the screen right now. If you want to have your name included, send us some money. Otherwise, if you're like brand new, just subscribe. That goes a long way, especially if you're watching on TV. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys soon with some more videos like this one. Bye.